Thank you so much for coming today. This is our third and final Voices from History Past program. And again, I cannot say thank you enough to Historic Hutchinson for making these, making these programs possible. This has just been fantastic. Today, we're welcoming Bill Arndt here. He does not need an introduction.
What do you mean?
So Bill's going to be here today to talk about agriculture. And since she just went scurrying behind the camera, thank you to Val Elder. Hopefully I get this on TV. She's making faces for filming these programs, which I love. I love having HCDN available so people can't come today. They can keep watching and learning about the history of Hutchinson. So I'm going to stop talking. We're here to listen to Bill. Thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you, and welcome. You know, there's one thing good about this. We can sit in an air-conditioned school. Doing all this updating on this, I always remember the days like today is the day you had to stack bales in a barn. How many can remember them days? Everybody knows what it is. And I see a young lady back there, she first year of farming out there in our neighborhood. They had hay down this tremendous. And her father-in-law would go to town and pick up a bunch of kids, bring them out. Time he got them out to the farm, it's too hot, we can't take them back. So myself and my daughter, who was back from Denmark at that time, went over and stacked bales. She shouldn't have been up in the barn, but she was up there. Anyway, I'm going to talk about agriculture and the development of Hutchinson. You looked at my nice straight fork. I must have bought this at one of Jim Fahey's auctions. But this was hanging in the shed, and I thought, well, might be worth it. I'm going to go back in history. We all heard about the Hutchinson brothers, Pendergast, McLeod, and that. Today I'm going to tell you the rest of the story. These men, Hutchinson brothers, are out here, statues, came to this town, or developed this town as speculators, McLeod, speculators. If you build it, they'll come. Remember that saying? You build it, they come. They laid out the town. Very nice. They had to lay out 2 towns because they couldn't get enough acreage just in one town. So they put 2, Harmony and Hutchinson. And that was the start of this area. Why did they come to this area? The Indians had been here for many, many years before. They lived well. But government rules came about, and the Indians had to move west further because this was such valuable land to develop as agriculture, cities, everything else. Okay, who came to develop this land? Immigrants, mainly from Europe, and some people from the east. I got a picture of a couple right there. He came to the United States in 1854. Why did he come to the United States in 1854? Because he wanted the freedom. He wanted to improve himself. He wanted to have something. The governments of Europe were more on the dictatorial side, but government told him exactly what to do, everything. And his family was a quite large family. By the way, the house that he was born in, I had supper in. The house is 600 years old. It's still in the family name. This is my great-great-grandfather. He came here to the United States in 1854. He worked in Iowa. And then all at once the Civil War broke out. The president said, We'll give you 160 acres of land if you come fight for the Union. Boy, what a deal, huh? 160 acres of land, free. If you live that long, the government had this all figured out. You know, there's thousands of them that never collected on this. But Charles there, he did. His real name is Wilhelm. He came back to Iowa after the Civil War. Guess what? The land was gone. People had speculated, bought up the land, and now there was no land of good quality down there in Iowa. So he heard about Minnesota. Came up to Minnesota, Sibley County. 160 acres of land in Sibley County. It's the Garden of Eden up here. They had everything. Good soil, trees, rivers. He homesteaded. Built a little shack for a home. We just call them shacks, but it was a home. And guess what he did then? He went back to Germany and married Anna. Guess what? That would have taken at least 6 months to get on the ship, going over, coming back. I mean, they didn't make it across the ocean in 8 hours like we do today. So he came back to Minnesota. They started their farming operation. Very little equipment did he have. He must have had a team of horses. Must have had a wagon. A few pots and pans, maybe he got his wife so she could cook. And they raised 10 kids. That was in the 1860s. This all started. 1860s, other immigrants kept coming here, picking up this land that we had. They found this area around Hutchinson, tremendous black soil, woods, rivers, lakes. Good, let's say good hunting, I mean, because they had to live off that for a while. Brought their cattle or a few cows up here and homesteaded up in this area. Okay, as these people started homesteading in here, there was a guy down in St. Paul, J.J. Hill. There's a market out there in Hutchinson. In the 1880s, J.J. Hill poked the railroad out to Hutchinson to haul these products out that were being raised and grown, bringing people out to this area. So the growth really started coming. It didn't have to come by wagon or walking or ox carts or anything like that. They could come out on the train and start their livelihood in Hutchinson. Now agriculture became a real boom because of the good soil, plenty of grass, plenty of water, plenty of everything. There's something I have not picked up on and wondered how it really happened. Hutchinson became such a dairy area. Where did all these dairy cows come from? Jim, you got any answers to that? It's just something, I mean, Hutchinson was received as a dairy, this whole area out here. Everybody had dairy cows. Sure, they came out one or two when they first started. Okay. As the farms grew, families grew, gosh, we gotta have a bigger barn. Everybody wonders what this log is doing on the table. This log is from old barn I tore down in 1989. You can see it as a hand-hewn log. Most of these barns at that time, between the 1880s and the 1895, were square-type barns. This one was 40 by 80. There's a lot of things on this log that, well, look at this, my drawing. I don't know, it didn't get anybody to draw it up. But these posts were corners of this barn. And would you know every one of them is numbered? Our barn out there started in the southeast corner. It was a basement barn. Southeast corner was number 1 log. It was maybe 20 feet long. It was oak. Oak was the wood for the main structure barns. This here is black ash. So I'm going to turn this over. How do I know it's number 1 log? Every one of them is numbered right here. And there's a slash in there. That's the number 1 southeast corner of the barn. These logs were not go chop the tree down, bring it in and do it right away. They chopped these trees down in the wintertime, hewed them off, took the bark off. This one has even got some saw marks on the one side. It was a gusset mark. See these round holes? Now they all say a square peg won't fit into a round hole. Right there it is. Last week, I got quite a number of these logs. In fact, we've made mantles out of them for fireplaces or shelves out of them. And where I got the black ash from, which is a very common tree in them days, they grew 40 feet straight, hardly any bigger than that, along the rivers and the swamps in this area. Very plentiful. So they could go out, there was many beams in the barn that were 30 feet long. So, we found one of these in one of the logs that are still out there. Doesn't fit. But when that was green, they pounded it in here. And you had to pound like the Dickens to get it out today. It was just like a rivet that grew in there. Square nails. Whole barn was built with square nails. But all the logs were pinned together by these. Like I said, this is a gusset angle up toward the roof. This barn had oak, ash, and the roof boards were elm. And the elm rafters. These elm rafters were really tough, still tough. And if you ever pounded a nail in them when they were green, you never pulled it out, never. Because it grew right into that nail was seized right into it. When we tore this barn down, I was very lucky to find something. That's a shingle from 1980s or 1880s. Why did the shingles last so well on these old barns? Because the roof boards were spaced far apart. They dried out from the bottom side. That's just about like it came off the tree. That's 100 and some years ago. It just happened when we took the barn down. Oh, look at there, found it. So I kept it in my personal keep. Everything my wife says. Anyway, once they built these barns, the dairy herds increased. More teams of horses. And I was going to tell you, this is also in our neighborhood west of town. I think there was 8 barns built in the 1880s. 8 barns. That's a lot of construction. And it was all with stuff like this. And when I was green, it was not light. It was all put up with jigs. But, interesting thing also, the foundations of these barns was all rock. And this rock, how was it put together? It wasn't put together with cement. It was yellow clay and straw. And today, I got a wall out there that's still standing of yellow clay and straw. It's holding rocks together. So they made the best of everything they had at the hand. How big a crew did it take? I don't know. This is something that somebody does a lot of deep research, maybe could find out. But I wouldn't doubt it was the neighbors got together and did it. Now I'm going back a little bit. How did these areas develop around Hutchinson? I said that they came from the Europeans in the east of the United States. They developed that way out here too. You go southwest of Hutch, or south of Hutch, it's Swedes and Danes and Norwegians, right? The Olsons and the Johnsons and the Jurgensons and stuff like that. Go west of Hutchinson, you got the Schmitz and the Platts and the Koers out west. Go north, it's the old Fallons, McCormick and stuff. But then you go to the east, that's all Polish and Czechoslovakian. Still today. I mean, the whole places out there. Okay. Why did they stay together? Because they spoke the same language. And most of their children did not go to school until they were 6 years old, and they did not speak any other language but the native language. But these people thought back there, schoolhouses. They were built about 2.5 miles apart, all the way around Hutchinson. These communities, our school's called the Zitz School. Some of them were called the Heatwood School. All the way around, they were the same. They usually found a person that could teach in English because the people knew English had to be the language that was coming. It wasn't going to stay German, or it wasn't going to stay Swedish or Danish, or it wasn't going to be Czechoslovakian. The day was coming when everybody had to learn English. So the teachers in these schools, got any old teachers in here? No. Oh yeah, there's one right there. But she's not old enough. She didn't have to teach. Maybe the Spanish kids you got to teach English, but that's it. Right, Kate? Well, anyway, all these school districts around this area all built a school building. Wasn't much. We all got our education there. Another thing about these neighborhoods, they formed townships. It's a form of government, the smallest grassroots government in the United States. It was a 6 by 6, 6 miles wide, 6 miles deep. And they determined how much taxes we're going to need to maybe put a road or a trail into Hutchinson. Before that, had a path here and a path there. But we're going to improve that so we can bring our products to Hutchinson. We're going to have to build these roads. So that was the township government that did this. They took the funds from farmland, taxes, and that, and did it very cheaply. Let's put it that way. Township government, everything they did is cheap. Used to be, at least. I was in township government. You had to go to the town hall meeting. You're going to spend X number of dollars for gravel. It's too much, right, Barb? She went to town board meetings. But they did economically. Okay, once these things were all formed, what came next? Each neighborhood had one of these churches. This is my old church where Karen and I, Brookfield, Minnesota. This church was moved from Stewart to Brookfield. Real proud of that. The church is still going. My grandfather is one of the starters of that. Oh yeah, I got another one. There's another old German. Grandma and Grandpa. He came over here in 1878. Worked as a hired man. Came through Milwaukee, where he had some family there. The Heller family was part of his family. Came through Milwaukee. Came up to Blakely, where his sister lived. And would you believe it, that he brought his twin brother, 2 sisters, and one brother stayed in Germany. After the Second World War, we lost contact with that. But they came to Blakely. Okay, he worked for a while, came up to Hutchinson area. He worked here on farms, made enough money to buy a little farm out near Cosmos. This lady here, she was here already. Her ancestry came the same time as this one. And that's where they got married. Their first wedding in the Cedar Mills Church when that was first opened many years ago. They farmed, like so many others that farmed around Hutchinson. Like I said, J.J. Hill, he found out there's a market out here. He had to get a railroad out. He came out here to Hutchinson, built this railroad for the people out here to sell their cattle, their hogs, their poultry, whatever else to be shipped out. They didn't have these semis like they do today. They had a cart. Most of the cows were led to town to put on the train car to ship to South St. Paul or other markets. So that's was the start of it. This agriculture around Hutchinson grew and grew and grew. I said it was known for the dairy around Hutchinson. Another thing that grew, you see this, McLeod County Agri Association. It started a fair here in Hutchinson 153 years ago. What did they start a fair for? So I could show you my cow, I could show you my horses, whatever else they could bring to the fair. Their cooking stuff and everything. It's small to start with, but we ended up with one of the nicest fairgrounds. Sure, we're over there now, but we had nice fairgrounds over down by 3M. Biggest grandstand west of the State Fair. Many things happened down there, races, cattle shows, daredevil shows, you name it. And it was brought people together. And if you look at old pictures from that time, the people came to the fair dressed up. Men had suits, ladies wore hats, long dresses. Just take a look at some of them old pictures. It was marvelous. But that was a big, big thing, going there and enjoying the fair. That helped Hutchinson grow because it brought more people in. Now the other thing that really started booming here, like I said, we had the cattle and the creameries and the poultry markets. And he came in with the railroad. 2 more railroads came to town. Milwaukee line came in up Jefferson Street. The loose line came in up by the light plant. Why did they come in? There was a market here. Loose line kept right on going. They went way out just about the Montevideo. Just a couple of weeks ago, it came from Wilmer, and I told the wife who was driving down the highway, Highway 7, Luce really had the best idea. If he'd have seen it today, his market would have been tremendous. There's millions and millions of bushels of corn and beans out there. But he couldn't make it to 2000. He had to close down the railroad. But you go west toward Cosmos, and you see these big bins, there's a million bushels. I think there were 7 million bushels of grain at Blomquist right now. And this had to be shipped. Now it's shipped by truck. And it takes 3.5 semi-loads to fill one rail car. Just think of how many trucks we could take off the road. And if you've been driving down Main Street lately, it's Jim could say that there's one truck after another, and then construction beside, it's busy. Well, this was today, but years ago, it was the farmers that brought stuff in by horses, by cars. I have a story to tell you. I think it was 1946. My father raised flax. He broke some sod. And this is clean soil, so flax did very well in it, because flax is very non-tolerable to weeds. 1946, they thrashed this. Got 8 bushels, $8 a bushel for flax. Unbelievable. The flax is in such a demand because of the oil, the linseed oil from flax. But one thing happened. Grandpa and another old gentleman, they were watching the wagon. No, flax can walk, they'll dump a whole wagon through that little hole. Because it's just like water. Grandpa and this other old gentleman, actually was the landlord of my dad's, Mr. Schmidt, and Grandpa sneezed. Teeth were gone in the flax. Well, I was just a little shaver, but I went along to the elevator when they unloaded this here. And the elevator had a screen they laid out on the dump scale. Grandpa got his teeth, blew them out and put them back in his mouth. You're talking about flax. Anybody guess what that was for? Well, it used to have a rawhide handle on it. I picked this up, my family junk stuff. And I can just remember Grandpa would stand beside the conveyor that went into the thrash machine, and flax was so fluffy that the knives on the thrash machine would not cut it. So as you threw a bundle on that conveyor, Grandpa would do like this, cut it before it went into the machine. Just a little relic. I made it, I knew what it was for. I'd seen it being used. 20 years from now, what kind of piece of junk is that? A sickle and a stick?
You better label it.
Label bar. So I mean, this was another crop that came into town. Another crop that came here, and it was raised by many people around Hutch, was hemp. Hemp. We call it hemp, marijuana, ditchweed, whatever it is. Ditchweed is a rival outfit, old hemp. 3M buildings, there's 3 of them down there, round roof. You drive by there, That's what a hemp plant was. I can remember as a little guy, my dad went with the four-wheel trailer behind the car. We didn't have a pickup. And we shoveled that trailer full of hemp stems. They were all broke down about that big. Ideal for chicken bedding. It was actually, they said it was healthy for the chickens, I don't know. And it done away with the mites and lice or whatever chickens had too. That's maybe just a story. But this, we loaded this up, took it and put it in the chicken barn. Okay, we had 4 elevators in Hutch at one time. The old mill down by the old dam, the Pacific Grain down in Jefferson, Farmer's Elevator, and the Farm Service over here. This area over here where the liquor store is and the police station, that was the hub of agriculture. And a creamery, lumberyard, grain buying stations, and machine dealers. All in this area down here, starting this off Washington Avenue. Blacksmith shops. There were 3 blacksmith shops in that area. And these brought farmers to town because in them days, those plow lays on a plow had to be sharpened. And I remember seeing Bill Jurgensen, about where Ace Hardware is here, he had a shop. And just to watch him put that plow lay into the forge, then take it out of the forge, either did it by hand or he had a pulsing hammer with all these bolts. One motor run all these bolts, would sharpen that layout. And then he'd harden it by putting it in cold water or oil, something like that. Farmers needed this. The railroads were very important to the farmers also. It shipped their products out, but also it brought the machinery in. Hutchinson had 7 different machine dealers in Hutchinson. Ford, International Harvester, Massey Harris, Ellis Chalmers, John Deere, this big building right over here, John Deere. It's the separate building. They also sold buggies and that, but that's when tractors came out. But before these tractors came out, I got to go. That's where I'm winging it bad, Jim. These here farmers had to cut the grain, shock the grain, and way back when, they stacked the grain. Anybody remember old pictures showing or bundle stacks of grain? I was wee kid, but I can remember when the thresh machine came to our neighbors. He had maybe 4 stacks of grain. He'd back the thresh machine in his old steamer. I don't know how he ever turned that thing, but he'd line it up, get that belt on there, and he'd pitch the bundles into the thresh machine. This could be even in December, depends on how big a stream he had. And these machines were old. We call old now, but some of them were pretty new, but the steamers weren't. They were 1900s. Avery and there's cases and everything else were built and powered by steam or straw. They didn't have enough wood, they used the straw to run the boiler. And this grain would be put in sacks. That's before a lot of elevators, or they put it in sacks, put it on the wagon, haul it into town or haul it into the grain bin on the farm to feed the animals. Wheat, barley, oats, spelts. Ask me what spelts is, I know. It was a seed that was kind of oblong. It wasn't square, it wasn't round, it was a funny shape. But this here was a great hog feed. They'd mix it in slop and it'd kind of activate the whole thing. And I got an old drill out to the farm. So many acres of spells, so many acres of wheat, so many acres of barley. Every farm raised this. But anything over came here. Sure, the yields weren't great of all these crops. They planted corn. Most of it was picked by hand in the early 1900s. Maybe 30, 40 bushels an acre. What do we get today? We're tapping on 300. It's just good land around Hutchinson. And that causes these markets, these million bushel bends to the west. And the unit trains that come out of Broughton go to the west coast, east coast, over across the ocean. So all this came to these towns. The elevators were here. Many little towns developed along, let's say Trabuso had one, Cosmos had one, Thorpe, Lake Lillian, Blomquist, all out west, all had a little elevator. But one of them little elevators today would hold maybe 2,000 bushels. Guess what they got out there now? So that was part of this history and development of Hutchinson. And we have to give these people that came from Europe, who were not afraid to work, not afraid to spend many, many, many hours breaking this soil. As I was going through this, I was thinking, I broke some old pasture land when I was a young person. That's sod. And I had a tractor and a 2-bottom plow. And sometimes you wouldn't go fast enough to turn the sod up like this, and you look back, it flopped right back in the same spot. You don't believe that, do you? But you think of this here prairie grass out here that we're seeing growing today. It's got roots way, way down. That took something. They did it with a one-lay plow with maybe a team of horses or a team of oxen. How did they bust this soil up enough to plant a crop in it? I just can't answer all these questions. The other thing I can't answer is these old barns and old houses. Buildings right here on Main Street. All rock foundation. How many have seen some of these old houses and that thing?
Where did the rock come from?
That's the question I'm going to ask you, Barb. Where did it come from?
There's no rocks here. Did they ship it from northern
No,
Wisconsin, from
it
my
all
farm?
came from local.
Farm, you know, there's rocks.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
But ask Clancy, how many rocks did you haul off the field?
The rocks, Bill, were so large when we changed our barn from 1 story to 2 stories, we could not pull those rocks out of there
Yeah.
with a big tractor.
They were all done by a tripod. Put the rock in place, but they had to dig this rock first.
Yes.
And if you've ever tried digging some of these rocks out in the field, even with today's modern equipment, I had a picture on Facebook, excuse me, of a farmer that farmed my land. Oh, they had a gigantic rock. Oh, it was on Facebook. Man, that must be a big one. Where'd it come from? Up there in the hill. Oh, I wonder. Anyway, I went over to see it. Well, my gosh. Old W.D. Ellis could pull that rock out of the field. But I mean, there's rocks out there in our fields, and your old farm, anybody's old farm, that are bigger than a caterpillar. Now, there's something about this, and I'd like to find the answer to it. In these old barns, there's a lot of rocks that are split. But you see a drill mark. Well, maybe that deep into that granite rock. And maybe you see two of them. That's how they split the rock. Some say not only explosives, but they'd fill these holes full of water and freeze them. Boom! That's how much pressure frozen water can create. I don't know, I wasn't there. But you go through these old buildings, the old barns, or you go some of these buildings right on Main Street. You'll find these rocks with a nice round hole, or it's a half hole now. Hand chisel with a star bit. Hammer, 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 hammer. That's how they did it.
Isn't there a rock at the museum that you donated?
Yeah, but that one there, she brought up the museum rock. Thank John Miller for talking me out of that one. I had it found it in the gravel pit, and I had it sitting up along the river, and John was out canoeing one day, and he seen that rock. Bill, I gotta have that rock. What rock? One that's sitting by the river. Oh, no, I'm not giving that up. It took a D8 cat to push it up there and to stand it up. And if any of you remember John Miller, I had him as a teacher in high school. When John wanted something, John got something. Well, he pestered me long enough. He said, I want that rock. You can do whatever, you put your name on it or anything that you want to do, but I want that up at the museum. Well, I finally broke down and gave him the rock. Temple and Erickson came out there with 2 payloaders, a lowboy, and they lifted that rock up, put it on the lowboy, and tied it down, and backed it up there, 2 payloaders, set it off. It's big, but there is a fracture mark in it. I didn't notice it until after we moved it. There is a fracture mark in it, so maybe someday she's just going to snap apart. But I got a bigger rock put in the same place. Another one when I did my gravel pit, found a bigger rock. And there's, I know there's some tremendous rocks that are, Miss Windorf over there, they did a tiling job. And I tried to move a rock in this soft soil. Never budged it. The thing must have been 12 feet high. It was an all blue rock. Now, blue rock indicates heaviness to me. And it was like a big spear. I'd like to have that rock sit by my house. I got a couple of them by my house anyway. I had a guy stop by the other day. Where'd you find that rock? Up on the farm. How much you want for it? Not for sale. You know, a rock will tell you, you can imagine, do a lot of imagining. This rock at the museum, when I had it sitting by the river, there was a little girl looking up the river. There's a feature on the face of it. Notice it, it's still facing down the river. I mean, sure, got to use imagination. A man in the rock out in New Hampshire, isn't it? Got to use your imagination. Or the one out in the Black Hills. Got to use your imagination. They've been carving that for the last 40 years. You still got to use your imagination. There you go, make it. So, I'm just about ending my little conversations here. I enjoy history. And if I could pass along some of the history, I can remember myself. I've done my job. If it wouldn't have been for these two people right here that came to this country to make life better for themselves and their families, and they multiplied. it multiplies. Val, Clancy, we're all bloodlines of right there. So, passing these along. Remember old stories? Guy used to live out by Pierce's, Pierce's Lake out northwest of town. He worked at 3M, and he was telling stories of his folks back in the 1880s. The Indians still lived in that old woods out there. And the real bad winters, they'd come up to his folks and see if they'd get some milk for the babies or some food for the kids. Their day of hunting and raising and fishing and traveling was gone, but they were still on their promised land, this area around Hutchinson. And I think that's what we enjoy, everything. One other story, I'm going to deviate from this. When these creamers and the lumber yards and all these businesses were in town, there used to be a rail all the way along this side, water trough over there, a rail all along this side. They tie these horses up. Well, we just seen not too long ago, and looking back 170 years ago or 150 years ago, how a team got loose and raced down what we call Main Street, and they finally had it captured. Nobody really got hurt. But I can remember one thing about this rail. There was rings on it where you could tie the horses up. The rings were loose on top of this rail. And if you take a stick and walk along, you could actually play music on the thing. Take a look at this rang. I know Grandpa says, don't you ever do that if there's horses around. So that's history. Grandpa told me that. Grandpa moved to Hutch from out in Cousins area. He moved to Hutch. He had a big garden here. And guess what? The other thing around here, water, good drinking water, was very accessible. Little Crow statue, when they rebuilt that, or moved it, they had to plug the water vein, or the sand point. And after many, many years of it running continuously, but it still ran. There's artesian wells all along the east side of this lake. And the other thing, you look through the history and all the artifacts that are sitting up at the museum or in your houses and that of Indians, where did it come from? So you knew the Indians, there was lots of them around here for many, many years. Why? Because this is the Garden of Eden for them. Good hunting, good fishing, good water. So, any questions? Thank you.
Why is that curved?
It's natural. That's a natural tree. All they did is hewed off the bark on that side, hewed off the bark on this side. There's some saw marks there, so they maybe hand cut a branch off there or something like that.
So all the logs had various little
Oh yeah, they're not all perfect.
holes in them.
Well, these holes are drilled in for...
No, these kind of holes. You could see through them.
Like underneath, yes. But this is the flat side. Here's where the siding was nailed onto. And if you can imagine...
They didn't have siding when they built it.
Yes, they did.
They did.
The siding was shipped in. The same as this.
Okay. From Canada?
Well, I don't know if it was all from Canada, but it was shipped in. It was what they call a shiplap, and it was a pine, white pine, and sawed and hung and grew. Some of them even had strips they put over the cracks. But this Our old barn didn't have it. So in the winter time, the air would go through pretty well upstairs. So that's just the way it was. Just for facing the east. And another thing about these old barns, you go through the whole neighborhood out there, they're all facing east or southeast. Stone walls around, protected from the cold weather. And then also, being built into a hill, they could drive right in with their teams, unload the hay and stuff like that. Newer barns, they had to pull it up from the outside, but the older barns, they drove through, or some of them drove all the way through. But these barns are all done about the same way. There's only one that I know is still standing. Hazel, where are you at? It was on her father-in-law's place. That's about the only barn that's still standing to that age. The rest are gone.
Is your farm his farm? Are you in an ancestral farm out there?
No, my dad bought it in 1946. No, he'd rented land before. And this is the thing also, the banks controlled so much of the land back then. Because of bad weather, the drought, the depression, and all that. The bank said, we gotta have this money. Okay, here's 40 acres, you can get 40 acres out here. The bank owned that 40 acres pretty quickly, owned a whole farm. Now, farmer could not pay it. A little bit of taxes they pay today, as we look at it today, is pocket change compared to tax we're paying today. But they had a hard time. Corn was selling for 4 cents a bushel.
And when you were a child, what was a good yield on corn?
Good yield?
How many bushels per acre?
Maybe 40?
Yeah. Because even I remember when it was consistently hitting 100, that was amazing.
Oh, amazing. I had Ray Eberhard as a teacher in high school. And Ray Eberhard in the ag class and FFA, we got a bag of corn. Had to keep a record of it. It was sponsored by a seed company here, DeKalb or Pioneer or something. Just a little bag. Okay. I went out in the field, and you would clean the planter boxes out, put that little bit of seed in, plant 4 rows or 6 rows in the regular field, not on the end rows or anything, but right in the middle of the field. This comparison. Seed companies wanted this comparison. So, come fall, the ag teacher and maybe a couple of people would come out, and the student would go out and harvest this. So many feet, so many inches, you'd harvest that, weigh it. Well, I'll never forget, we got 106 bushels an acre. My dad's impossible. That's impossible. Corn don't yield that much. That same field, 3 years ago, was 216 bushels.
Yeah, but the rows are close together now.
But genetics. That's the secret. Genetics. Last year, as dry as it was, this corn is bred to tolerate dry weather. And they were getting 200 bushel an acre corn. Now people are saying 300 is nothing anymore. They're getting it. Oats, I would say, was one crop that I can remember. My dad and 2 brothers had a threshing group together. And you always had this dumper on the threshing sheet, so you knew it. Say, how many bushels came out? You know, you fill that bucket up and dump out. Fill that bucket up, dump out. And you kept counting them. And man, my one uncle had 120 bushel an acre oats. You know, oats hadn't spent the money in planting oats for genetics. like they did corn and soybeans and stuff like that. But genetics is the whole secret to the whole thing of breeding this. Any other questions? Yes?
Can we do a commercial?
This,
What's that?
What did
Okay. Well, you heard about the blacksmith. There was another blacksmith shop down where you were talking, and that belonged to Corngable. And you know, John Corngable was the architect of this building, and his father, Walter, remembered the story when he was a little boy working at the blacksmith shop, keeping the flies off the horses as his dad, Andreas, was shoeing the old horses.
And like I always said, I love to read a book.
oh, please do.
You should.
This way. There's a way I could do it now, but I don't want to even start. My daughter hooked me up with the computer. And as I thought, guess what?
Hey, you're starting.
But the title of the book is the only thing I ever got done. Who cares?
It's on record that he's writing a book. I am remembering that, Bill. That's going to be added to our collection someday. Your book is going to be added here. I'm going to be waiting for it. Oh my gosh. I cannot thank you all enough. I cannot thank Historic Hutchinson enough. Every time I stand up here, I get goosebumps because I look at the librarians before me and I'm like, we are doing exactly what they want us to be doing. We are learning, we are respecting our community, we're loving our community, we're gathering together. This has just been a phenomenal summer, and I hope to partner again with Historic Hutchinson again next summer. This is fantastic. Thank you all for coming. Thank you.